In the summer of 1942, the Pacific Ocean became the stage for a new kind of warfare. One fought across vast distances, where ships vanished as easily as men's names from memory. The Battle of Guadalcanal had begun, and for the first time, the United States Navy faced the Imperial Japanese fleet in a series of bloody and chaotic engagements that would decide control of the South Pacific. Amidst this turmoil sailed the light cruiser USS Juno, a ship destined for tragedy, and home to one of the 5 most forgotten heroes lost at sea, Lieutenant James Rowe. Rowe was a quiet man by nature, 27 years old, a communications officer from Illinois, known for his calm under pressure. On the morning of November 13, 1942, the Juno joined a small task group under Admiral Daniel Callahan, steaming toward the waters north of Guadalcanal. Their orders were clear: intercept a Japanese bombardment force heading for Henderson Field. What no one knew then was that this would be one of the most chaotic surface battles of the entire war. As night fell, the US formation moved into Iron Bottom Sound, named later for the dozens of ships and thousands of sailors that would rest forever beneath its waves. Radar contacts appeared and vanished. Confusion reigned. The engagement that followed was short, brutal, and utterly disorienting. Japanese battleships, Hiei and Kirishima, unleashed their main guns at point-blank range. Rowe's ship, the Juno, fought back ferociously, firing salvos from her 6-inch guns. She helped sink the destroyer Udachi and crippled another. But her luck was short-lived. In the early morning haze, a torpedo from the Japanese submarine, I-26, struck the Juno on her port side. The explosion ripped through the ship's ammunition magazine, splitting her in two. Within 20 seconds, she was gone. Of the 697 men aboard, more than 100 survived the initial blast, including, possibly, Lieutenant Rowe. But in the chaos of the continuing battle, no rescue operation could be mounted. US ships withdrew under orders, assuming the Juno's crew had perished. For 8 long days, survivors floated on makeshift rafts and debris, battling thirst, exposure, and shark attacks. Only 10 men would live to tell what happened. The rest, including the 5 Sullivan brothers and Lieutenant Rowe, disappeared into the Pacific. Their bodies never recovered. In the Navy's after-action reports, Rowe's name appeared once, then was lost in a sea of redacted lists and casualty summaries. In his last known letter, written just 2 days before the battle, Rowe described the eerie calm of the ocean at dusk. "It's strange," he wrote, "how peaceful it looks when you know somewhere out there. Someone is aiming right back at you." His words capture the essence of that campaign. The stillness before annihilation, the fragility of men surrounded by steel and sea. Years later, naval divers and researchers mapped the floor of Iron Bottom Sound, identifying twisted remains of several vessels. Among them, the shattered hull of a light cruiser, confirmed to be the USS Juno, but no trace of the hundreds who went down with her was ever found. The water, at a depth of nearly 14,000 feet, has sealed its secrets tight. Even today, sonar scans reveal little beyond fragments of twisted metal and unmarked debris fields. Rowe's family never received his body, only a standard telegram and a folded flag. His name is engraved at the Manila American Cemetery among 36,000 others missing from the Pacific Theater. Yet, unlike the famous Sullivan brothers whose story became a rallying cry, Rowe's service, his calm leadership, his sacrifice, faded quietly from public memory. Perhaps that is the cruelest irony of war, that some names echo through history, while others sink beneath the waves, forgotten but not unworthy. When oceanographers revisited the site decades later, they noted the eerie preservation of the wreck, resting upright on the seabed. The Juno's bow was found separated from her stern by nearly half a kilometer, a testament to the violence of the explosion. No human remains were visible. Only the ship's bell and fragments of brass instrumentation remained intact, untouched by time. The Navy chose not to disturb the site, designating it a war grave. Lieutenant James Rowe became, in the end, both a symbol and a question, a representative of the hundreds of naval officers who vanished without trace, their courage lost in operational summaries and missing persons lists. His last recorded act, relaying critical communication orders during the battle's confusion, may have saved other ships from destruction that night. But the sea does not record heroism, only silence. As the Pacific tides rolled endlessly over Iron Bottom Sound, Roe's fate became one more mystery, one of thousands swallowed by war's unrelenting chaos. And yet, his story opens a haunting truth, that beneath the victories and parades, the ocean still holds the voices of men who fought, fell, and disappeared without witness. Their legacy lies not in the battles they fought, but in the questions they left behind, questions that lead us deeper into the forgotten stories of those lost at sea. In July 1942, as the Pacific front stretched northward toward the cold, fog-wrapped Aleutian Islands, the USS Grunion, a new Gato-class submarine, slipped quietly from the naval base at Dutch Harbor, Alaska. She was one of the first American submarines assigned to patrol these remote waters, where the Japanese had seized Attu and Kiska. Her mission was clear but perilous: intercept enemy supply convoys and harass any ships supporting the northernmost Japanese outposts. On board were 70 men, led by Lieutenant Commander Manett Jim Abele. Among them served Chief Radioman Harold Red Lawson, a veteran of the pre-war fleet, known for his steady hands and even steadier nerves. He would become one of the 5 forgotten heroes lost at sea. The Aleutian campaign was unlike any other in the Pacific. The weather was the true enemy. Fog so thick you could taste it, freezing gales that coated deck guns in ice, and seas so rough they broke men's bones. It was here, in this desolate corner of the world, that the Grunion embarked on what would be her first and last patrol. She left Dutch Harbor on June 30th, 1942, heading toward Kiska. The crew's log entries during those early days tell of anticipation and cold exhaustion. One note, written by Lawson himself, reads, "Radio silence is our only comfort. Out here we are ghosts already." By mid-July, the Grunion had engaged multiple enemy targets. On July 15th, she reported sinking 2 Japanese patrol boats and damaging a third near Kiska Harbor. Her coded transmissions were concise, confident, typical of Abele's command style. But on July 30th, after sending a final message that she was low on torpedoes and heading home, all communication ceased. The Navy waited. Days turned to weeks. When she failed to arrive at Dutch Harbor, the Grunion was declared overdue and presumed lost. No distress signal, no debris, no survivors. For years, her disappearance became one of the Navy's enduring mysteries. There were no enemy claims of a kill, no intercepted signals suggesting her fate. Some theorized that a malfunctioning torpedo, a known defect in early Mark 14 models, might have circled back, striking the submarine that fired it. Others speculated she was caught in the violent currents off Kiska's volcanic coast and crushed by pressure after an uncontrolled dive. The ocean offered no answers. In 1944, a Japanese logbook surfaced, containing an account from the cargo vessel Kanomaru, which reported being attacked by a submarine off Kiska on the same day the Grunion vanished. The ship claimed to have fired a defensive salvo of depth charges after one of the torpedoes ran erratically. The report described bubbles and oil rising to the surface, a vague but haunting clue. Yet no confirmation came, and the war moved on, leaving the Grunion and her crew to fade into silence. Chief Radioman Lawson's story ended in that silence. He had been responsible for the Grunion's last radio contact, a transmission sent at 0800 hours on July 30th. In it, he noted enemy contact, maneuvering, followed by a final burst of static. That fragment, preserved in Navy archives, is all that remains of his voice. For his family back in Maine, the official notice, "Missing in action, presumed lost," arrived months later. No funeral, no remains, just an empty chair at the dinner table and a name engraved on a bronze wall. For decades, the mystery endured. Then, in August 2006, nearly 64 years after the Grunion's disappearance, the Abele family funded a private search. Using side-scan sonar and remotely operated vehicles, they discovered a submarine wreck at a depth of 3,200 feet near Kiska Island. The hull bore the unmistakable silhouette of a Gato-class submarine, its bow section split cleanly from the rest. Later analysis confirmed it, USS Grunion had finally been found. The wreck's condition suggested she suffered catastrophic damage consistent with an internal explosion, possibly from one of her own torpedoes malfunctioning. The bow, twisted and mangled, appeared to have imploded under pressure as the submarine sank. No human remains were visible. The deep had claimed them all. The site was declared a war grave, left undisturbed in eternal darkness. For historians, the discovery brought closure, but not answers. Why did the Grunion's final torpedo malfunction? Could Lawson's last radio message have been a desperate attempt to warn other submarines about the defect? The Mark 14's notorious flaws had plagued the Navy for years, causing countless losses before they were corrected in 1943. Perhaps Lawson's final act was one of warning, a message too late to save himself, but vital for those who followed. Today, the Grunion rests silently on the seafloor, her story pieced together from fragments of metal, codebooks, and family recollections. She lies far from home, beneath freezing waters that rarely see sunlight. Yet in that stillness, there remains an echo, a signal never received, a transmission lost in static. Chief Radio Man Harold "Red" Lawson was more than a name on a list. He was part of the invisible network that kept the US submarine fleet alive in its darkest hours. His calm, his duty, and his final unrecorded message stand as a testament to the countless naval men who disappeared into the ocean's shadows. And so, the Grunion's rediscovery reminds us that not all mysteries stay buried. Some resurface, briefly, painfully, only to deepen the question of what really happened out there. In the lonely expanse between ice, fog, and silence, the Pacific has given back fragments of truth, but never the full story. And for the men of the Grunion, it seems that the sea still guards its final secret. July 1945. The Pacific War was nearing its end, but the sea remained a dangerous place. The USS Indianapolis, a Portland-class heavy cruiser, had just completed one of the most secret missions of World War II, delivering the uranium and key components for Little Boy, the atomic bomb later dropped on Hiroshima. Only a handful of top officers knew the true nature of her cargo. Among her crew of 1,996 was Seaman First Class Robert Walker, a 20-year-old sailor from Kansas City. His last letters home spoke of pride and exhaustion. He told his mother, "We're running supplies to the islands, nothing exciting." In truth, he was part of a mission that would change history. The Indianapolis completed her delivery at Tinian Island on July 26, 1945, then set course for Leyte in the Philippines. No escort accompanied her. Intelligence had reported the route clear of enemy submarines. Captain Charles McVeigh III maintained a steady pace across open ocean, unaware that beneath the waves lurked one of Japan's last active hunters, the submarine I-58, commanded by Mochitsura Hashimoto. Shortly after midnight on July 30th, disaster struck. 2 torpedoes slammed into the cruiser's starboard side. The first destroyed the bow. The second hit near the fuel tanks, igniting a massive explosion. Within 12 minutes, the Indianapolis rolled and sank. Hundreds were trapped below deck. The rest, around 900 men, found themselves in the open sea, without life rafts, without food, and without rescue. Among them was Seaman Walker, clutching a fragment of cork float, his uniform soaked in oil, his eyes scanning the horizon for help that would not come. For 4 days, the survivors drifted under the blistering sun. Their greatest enemy was not the Japanese, it was the ocean itself. Thirst drove men mad. Some drank seawater, hallucinated, and swam off toward imagined ships. Sharks, drawn by the scent of blood and oil, circled the helpless clusters of men. Each night, the water boiled with movement and screams. Those who survived later said it was impossible to sleep, impossible to look away. Walker's name appears in a survivor's account kept by boatswain's mate Adolfo Celaya. Celaya described a young man from Kansas City who tried to keep morale up by telling stories and reciting baseball stats. On the second day, that same sailor slipped beneath the surface and was never seen again. The Navy never confirmed the identity, but the timing and details match Walker's service record. It is likely his final act was helping keep his fellow sailors awake, reminding them to hope, even when hope was gone. The most haunting part of the Indianapolis story is not the attack itself, but the failure that followed. The ship's distress signal went unheard. Her sinking went unreported. For 4 days, no one knew the cruiser was missing. Bureaucratic confusion, poor communication, and wartime secrecy combined into a perfect storm of neglect. When a routine patrol plane finally spotted oil slicks and survivors on August 6th, nearly 600 men had already died. Only 316 were rescued alive. When the Navy compiled the casualty lists, Robert Walker's name appeared among the missing. His remains were never recovered. His family received the same standard telegram thousands of others did. Missing in action while in the service of his country. His mother reportedly refused to believe it at first, convinced he'd been rescued and lost again somewhere in the Pacific theater. Like many families, She lived for years in the limbo between hope and grief. Captain McVeigh became the only commanding officer of the war court-martialed for losing his ship to enemy action. He was accused of failure to zigzag, a maneuver intended to make torpedo targeting more difficult. Despite testimony from Hashimoto himself, who admitted that the attack would have succeeded regardless, McVeigh was found guilty. The controversy haunted him for decades, until Congress cleared his name in 2000. By then, most of his crew had long since passed, their fates sealed by the sea. In 2017, 72 years after the sinking, a research team led by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen located the wreck of the Indianapolis at a depth of over 18,000 feet in the Philippine Sea. The ship's hull lay broken but recognizable, its name still visible on the twisted stern. Among the debris, divers identified a single life raft, still lashed to the deck, a silent witness to the night the ocean swallowed nearly 1,000 men. The find brought closure to historians, but not to families like the Walkers, whose son remained somewhere among the unseen. The Indianapolis tragedy stands as one of the worst naval disasters in US history, a story of heroism and failure intertwined. It revealed how, even in the war's final weeks, communication lapses could doom hundreds, and it proved that valor does not always earn remembrance. While the delivery of the atomic bomb changed the world, the men who ensured it arrived safely became ghosts of that achievement, unknown, uncelebrated, and lost. Seaman First Class Robert Walker represents those voices. Not a commander, not a legend, just a sailor who did his duty, endured unimaginable terror, and vanished into the Pacific without a trace. His courage was ordinary, which makes it extraordinary. Even now, beneath 3 miles of salt water, the Indianapolis rests in silence. The currents wash through her broken corridors, where the ghosts of the crew seem to linger in the darkness. The Navy has declared her a protected war grave, a sacred site that will never be disturbed. But for the families, the ocean's silence is an unending echo, a question that can never be answered. Why him? Why there? Why forgotten? The ocean, as always, gives no reply. By 1943, the skies over the Pacific had become as dangerous as the seas below. Long-range reconnaissance and patrol squadrons, flying lumbering seaplanes like the PBY Catalina, served as the Navy's eyes over thousands of square miles of hostile ocean. Among the men who flew these missions was aviation machinist's mate Charles Denton, a quiet 24-year-old from Oregon assigned to Patrol Squadron 54, or VP-54. His job was to maintain the engines mid-mission, monitor power levels, and assist with emergency repairs if the aircraft was damaged. He was also the squadron's unofficial mechanic philosopher, known to tell his crewmates, "A good engine's like a good man. It'll run through hell if you treat it right." Denton's unit operated from Espiritu Santo, a remote island base in the New Hebrides chain. The airmen lived in tents on coral dust, surrounded by the ceaseless drone of insects and the constant roar of takeoffs from the lagoon. Their patrols covered the Solomon Sea, tracking Japanese submarines, rescuing downed pilots, and scouting convoys heading toward Guadalcanal. Each flight lasted up to 14 hours, pushing both men and machine to their limits. Their aircraft, the consolidated PBY Catalina, was dependable but slow, an easy target for enemy fighters. The crews called it the Flying Coffin. On March 22, 1943, Denton's crew, 10 men under Lieutenant Robert Ellery, took off before dawn for a routine anti-submarine patrol over the northern Solomon Sea. They carried depth charges, survival rafts, and limited radio gear. The weather forecast warned of tropical storms, but Ellery decided to proceed. Their assigned sector stretched 400 miles north of Espiritu Santo, where Japanese submarines had been sighted near Bougainville. The Catalina's engines hummed through the morning haze. At 0840 hours, the plane's last confirmed position was transmitted by radioman Second Class Arthur Henson. Sector clear. Returning to grid Delta 7. After that, nothing. The squadron expected their return by 1500 hours. When the Catalina failed to arrive, base operations sent out a recall signal. No response. Search aircraft scoured the projected flight path through the evening and into the next day. They found no oil slick, no floating debris, no emergency flares. The Catalina and her 10-man crew had vanished into the Pacific. Denton's maintenance logs, later recovered from his tent, were precise to the hour, his last entry the night before. Both engines sound clean. Weather could be a problem tomorrow. Will monitor. Officially, The Navy listed the loss as presumed weather-related, but within the squadron, whispers spread. A pilot from VP-34 claimed to have intercepted a partial distress transmission, unintelligible except for the words "Engine 2, fire," and then static. The possibility of mechanical failure was plausible. The Catalina's right side Pratt & Whitney engines had a known issue with oil pressure at high humidity. Others speculated the aircraft may have been ambushed by a Japanese night fighter, a Jake reconnaissance float plane, or even a Zero on extended patrol. The truth was impossible to prove. After the war, scattered reports trickled in. A New Zealand coastal radar operator recalled detecting an unidentified low-flying aircraft near Bougainville on that same morning. Japanese logs from Rabaul made no mention of an engagement, but one entry referred cryptically to an American patrol destroyed by nature, coordinates unknown. The ocean kept its silence, and Denton's family received the same telegram so many others did. Your son is missing in action. No remains were ever found. What makes Denton's disappearance particularly haunting is how completely it vanished from memory. While many wartime losses were at least recorded through survivor accounts or wreckage finds, VP-54's missing Catalina was forgotten even by its own records. In 1946, the Navy declassified thousands of patrol reports, but the file for Ellery's flight was inexplicably incomplete, several pages missing, others stamped inconclusive. Whether due to bureaucratic oversight or deliberate omission, no one knows. In 2008, a group of aviation historians and divers attempted to locate the wreck. Using archived flight paths and Japanese weather charts, they identified a possible crash site 200 miles east of Bougainville, where the seafloor drops abruptly to 10,000 feet. A sonar scan revealed an anomaly consistent with a medium-sized aircraft fuselage, but the currents, depth, and heavy silt prevented a definitive identification. To this day, no expedition has returned. What endures are fragments of stories. A fisherman from the Solomon Islands once claimed his grandfather saw a burning aircraft fall into the sea with smoke like a volcano. Others spoke of floating debris that washed ashore days later, pieces of metal and fabric marked with faded US Navy insignia. None of it was preserved. The Pacific has a way of swallowing evidence, erasing even the traces of human effort. Denton's story captures a different kind of loss, the quiet disappearance. Without witnesses or headlines, where duty fades into obscurity. His crewmates were not shot down in glory or captured in battle. They simply ceased to exist, consumed by the elements they challenged daily. In one of his last letters, Denton wrote, "Sometimes I think the ocean keeps score. Every time we fly over it, it looks up and waits. If you fly over the Solomon Sea today, you'll see only endless blue, no marker, no memory, no trace of the 10 men who vanished on March 22, 1943. Yet their flight logs, their signatures, and their silence remain in Navy archives, fragile paper relics of courage and mystery. For their families, time has done what the ocean did not: erase the edges, blur the details, and leave only questions. And so, the name Charles Denton joins the others: Rowe, Lawson, Walker, a growing list of forgotten men lost at sea, whose absences felt more deeply because they were never found. Each story builds upon the last, each disappearance echoing the same truth. In the war against time and tide, the ocean always wins. The next chapter reveals yet another loss, one that unfolded not in the air or at the surface, but deep beneath, where silence is absolute and light never reaches. By 1944, the Pacific had become an immense battlefield of silence and steel. Beneath the surface, submarines waged a hidden war, hunting enemy convoys, cutting supply lines, and gathering intelligence vital to the Allied advance. Among these silent hunters was the USS Swordfish, SS-193, a veteran of the early war campaigns. Her reputation was built on daring patrols across the South China Sea, and she had already sunk over a dozen Japanese vessels. But in January 1945, during what was to be her 13th patrol, she disappeared without trace. Among her 89-man crew was torpedoman second-class Franklin Frank Hughes, one of the Navy's unheralded technicians, a man whose skill in maintaining the ship's torpedo systems had earned him quiet respect. He would never return. The Swordfish left Pearl Harbor on December 22, 1944, under the command of Commander Keats C. Montross. Her orders were to patrol near Okinawa, then proceed toward the East China Sea to disrupt Japanese shipping routes. The area was treacherous, heavily mined, patrolled by aircraft, and ringed with destroyers desperate to defend the home islands. On January 3, 1945, the Swordfish was ordered to report her position and progress. She acknowledged the message, confirming her presence in her assigned area. After that, the sea fell silent. No further transmissions were received. When she failed to report again on January 12th, the Navy initiated search sweeps, but nothing was found. The Swordfish, one of the most experienced submarines in the Pacific Fleet, had simply vanished. Frank Hughes's last letter home, written days before departure, captured the mixture of fatigue and fatalism common among submariners. The ocean's getting colder, the nights longer. If I don't write again soon, don't worry. No news usually means we're still running quiet. Those words reached his family weeks after the Navy declared the Swordfish overdue and presumed lost. For them, running quiet became both a comfort and a curse. The loss of the Swordfish sparked an investigation, though wartime secrecy meant most details remained classified for decades. Japanese anti-submarine records later revealed that on January 12, 1945, an enemy aircraft and destroyer had attacked an unidentified submarine off Okinawa. The destroyer, Kishinami, dropped a series of depth charges over an oil slick, reporting bubbles and debris rising to the surface. US Navy intelligence later confirmed that this location matched the Swordfish's patrol zone. Yet no wreckage was recovered, and the depth of the ocean there, over 6,000 feet, made verification impossible. Frank Hughes's shipmates were seasoned veterans of undersea warfare. They knew the risks: mechanical failure, faulty torpedoes, collapsing hulls, and the ever-present menace of depth charges. For every enemy ship sunk, the submariners paid a heavy toll. 1 in 5 US submarines deployed during World War II never returned, a staggering loss rate higher than any other branch of service. The Swordfish's disappearance was one among many, yet the timing of her loss, just months before Japan's surrender, lent it a tragic finality. Years later, analysis of Japanese minefield charts suggested another possibility. The Swordfish may have struck a newly laid minefield near Okinawa. The area had been heavily reinforced in late December 1944, precisely along her intended route. If true, the explosion would have been instantaneous, leaving no time for distress calls or escape. One naval historian wrote, "For the crew of the Swordfish, there would have been no awareness, only darkness and silence." In 1963, oceanographers mapping the seafloor east of Okinawa detected what appeared to be a metallic anomaly, an elongated structure roughly the size of a submarine hull. The technology at the time could not confirm details, and the site was left unexplored. In 2010, using more advanced sonar, researchers from the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force revisited the area. The scans revealed a broken structure partially buried in silt. The shape and dimensions closely matched those of a Gato-class submarine. Still, without direct inspection or photographic confirmation, the Navy has never officially declared it the Swordfish. Frank Hughes' name is carved into the tablets of the missing at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu. His service record lists him as missing, presumed killed in action. Yet his legacy, like so many others, is preserved in the small acts that kept his submarine alive during countless perilous patrols. Tightening valves, recalibrating pressure gauges, maintaining torpedoes that would never be fired. He was one of thousands of unsung specialists who kept the machinery of war running in the shadows. Submariners often spoke of the two worlds they inhabited, the one of sunlight and sky they left behind each time they submerged, and the one of eternal darkness below, where steel was their only protection from crushing pressure. To live underwater for weeks was to live in isolation, surrounded by silence so complete that even breathing sounded like thunder. Hughes once described it in his diary. "When we dive, it feels like the world stops. No sound, no horizon. Just trust, trust. In their machines, in their commanders, in one another." It was that trust that carried the Swordfish and her crew through 12 successful patrols, and it was that same trust that led them into their final dive. For the Navy, the Swordfish remains one of 52 submarines lost during the war, each a tomb resting unseen on the ocean floor. For families like the Hugheses, there is no grave to visit, no marker to stand before, only a name and an ocean that stretches endlessly. And yet, for all the silence that surrounds them, There is something profoundly enduring about these missing submariners. They represent not just the cost of war, but the mystery that still shrouds it. The human stories sealed inside the deep. As historians and explorers continue to search the Pacific's depths, they hope to find what the ocean has hidden for 80 years, the wreck of the Swordfish, and with it, answers. Until then, her men remain where they served, beneath the waves, still on patrol. The final chapter of this story brings together all these forgotten heroes, uniting their stories into one haunting legacy of duty, disappearance, and remembrance. The Pacific War ended in August 1945, but for thousands of families, the sea never released its grip. The men of the USS Juneau, the USS Grunion, the USS Indianapolis, VP-54's lost Catalina, and the USS Swordfish, each vanished in separate corners of the ocean, their stories scattered like wreckage across time. Their names were entered into Navy reports, memorials, and telegrams, but their fates were left unfinished. They became part of a silent fraternity, the forgotten heroes lost at sea. History remembers victory. It remembers the flag raised on Iwo Jima, the surrender signed aboard the USS Missouri, the jubilant headlines that declared peace. But beneath those triumphs lie stories like these, of courage swallowed by the tide, of men who fought unseen battles and whose endings were written not in ink, but in water. Lieutenant James Rowe of the Juneau, Chief Radioman Harold Lawson of the Grunion, Seaman Robert Walker of the Indianapolis, Aviation Machinist Charles Denton of VP-54, and Torpedoman Frank Hughes of the Swordfish. 5 men whose lives now drift together in memory. Though they never met, each represented a different front of the same war. Surface, submarine, sky, each carried out his duty to the end. Yet what unites them most is not how they fought, but how they were lost, suddenly, inexplicably, in moments that left no witnesses. Their disappearances were not heroic spectacles, but quiet vanishings, swallowed by the same element they had trusted to bear them home. After the war, efforts to locate missing ships became a quiet obsession for naval historians and families alike. The Navy established the Graves Registration Service, an office tasked with cataloguing the missing. Reports flooded in, coordinates, last sightings, fragmented radio logs, but the Pacific was too vast, too deep. In places like Iron Bottom Sound, the Philippine Sea, and the waters north of Kiska, wrecks lay scattered beyond the reach of divers or sonar. For every discovery, a dozen mysteries remained. Some wrecks, like the Indianapolis and Juneau, were eventually found, confirming grim details long suspected. Others, like VP-54's Catalina and the Swordfish, remain only as blips on sonar screens and memories in family letters. For the families left behind, the absence of closure was its own kind of torment. Without remains, without graves, they were asked to believe in finality without evidence. Many built small memorials in their gardens or placed empty headstones in local cemeteries. Others simply waited. As one widow wrote in 1947, "If the ocean could speak, it would not be quiet in my dreams." It is a sentiment shared by generations of those whose loved ones were lost in naval service. Then and now. The mystery of the sea has always shaped the Navy's identity. Sailors live and die by its moods, knowing that a calm surface can conceal infinite danger. To those who serve upon it, the ocean is both enemy and ally, capable of granting life or taking it without warning. In that balance of fear and respect lies the heart of every naval story, and of every man who sailed into the unknown. Today, more than 80 years after the Second World War, technological advances have begun to illuminate these dark chapters. Deep-sea exploration teams, using autonomous underwater vehicles and sonar mapping, have located dozens of previously lost warships. Each discovery tells a story of its own. Twisted steel confirming the final moments described in forgotten logs, pieces of uniform recovered from silted decks, names finally matched to places. Yet, as new wrecks are found, the mystery only grows deeper. For every ship uncovered, others remain missing, ghosts in the deep, their coordinates erased by time and current. The 5 forgotten men at the heart of this story symbolize the countless others who never returned. Their service records read like fragments of a single narrative. Courage under fire, disappearance under silence, remembrance under shadow. In their stories, we glimpse not only the cost of war, but the humility of service. Men who did their duty without expectation of recognition, whose last acts were unseen but not unworthy. Perhaps that is why these stories endure. Because every time a diver descends into the depths, or a historian opens a forgotten logbook, or a family member whispers a name at a memorial, the silence shifts ever so slightly. The ocean, vast and eternal, holds its secrets tightly, but it does not forget. In the cold, lightless corridors of sunken steel, the legacy of these men remains preserved in perfect stillness. When the narrator of this story falls silent, the listener might imagine the gentle rhythm of waves. Each crest and fall is a heartbeat, each whisper of foam a name spoken softly. Rowe, Lawson, Walker, Denton, Hughes. 5 men whose stories span the surface, the sky and the depths, but whose fates meet in the same eternal ocean. In the end, the mystery is not just about how they died, but how we remember them. The war may have ended, but their patrols continue, carried on by the ships, sailors, and historians, who still search the sea for answers. And as long as those stories are told, the forgotten will remain alive in the world above. The Pacific keeps its secrets, but it also keeps its heroes.